Hello, friends. Welcome to this session on Entrepreneur Starting Point. On behalf of Dheya, my name is Ravi. I welcome you all and hope you will have a valuable and a learning session for the next 30 minutes. A quick introduction about myself. I've worked in corporate for 21 years and now I can say I'm a social entrepreneur by myself, and I have applied some parts of these learnings which I'm going to share with you by myself, but there are many more even I'm learning with every day that passes by. So before we get into the entrepreneur's starting point, the fundamental premise for this session is when anyone gets an idea for a startup or a new business or a venture, and entrepreneurship is the buzzword now, there are a few basic checkpoints or actions that one need to complete before you get going. So that is what we're going to focus on in this session. So first of all, who is an entrepreneur? So simply put, a person who sets up the business and one who takes a risk in growing the business. This is the most important element. An entrepreneur is the one who actually owns up and takes accountability in the risk of growing the business, because the businesses can fail as well. And there are many stories of businesses failing, though unfortunately we don't get to hear them. I personally feel we also need to know and understand all those businesses that fail, because there's a lot of learnings from it. And it's not negative. There's nothing wrong in failures. That's part of the learning process. So just a few examples. I'm sure most of you know these names, starting from J.R.D. Tata, who's an entrepreneur of that generation, to Narayan Murthy of Infosys, Dhirubhai Ambani, and Vijay Shekhar Sharma of Paytm. And similarly, just to have diversity, I'm even showing few women entrepreneurs, Chumbak by Shubhra Chadda, Your Story Media by Shraddha Sharma, Yatra.com by Sabina Chopra, and Biocon Kiran Mazumdar Shah, who is most popular. So there are several such examples, hundreds and thousands of examples within India and across the globe. I have taken all Indian examples intentionally just to give you a flavor of the diversity of entrepreneurs that we ourselves have, right? And what are the differentiators for an entrepreneur? What makes an entrepreneur successful? First, clarity of thought. Whatever idea you have, any business idea, something you want to make a difference, you need to be very clear what is that you're addressing, either a problem or an opportunity you see in terms of the solution that you're addressing, either a product or a service. So you need to answer these basic questions. What do I want to do? Why am I doing? The why part is most important. And how will I do it? Are you addressing the why part of it in terms of addressing any social problem, or do you see a huge commercial business opportunity? It can be anything, but that has to be very clear. So the clarity of thought is the most important factor for any entrepreneur before you go ahead. Then comes a self-confidence. Trust me, an entrepreneur has to be self-driven. Whenever you come up with an idea, there will be 10 people who will say 20 different things, right? And that's natural. That's part of life. So it is always important to take inputs from people and take the constructive feedback, right? And hence you need to be able to differentiate what is a constructive feedback and what is a criticism. It's a very thin line of difference. Some people criticize just maybe to pull you down, saying that, oh, this won't work. There are already 10 people who have done it and they have not been successful. Why are you wasting your time? You keep hearing these phrases enough and more, right? But you need to be clear, how are you different from those others who could not succeed in the past, who have done similar business activity? So you take those inputs in a constructive way and you adopt them. So having the self-confidence is very important. And the risk-taking ability. As I said in my previous slide, this is a key aspect of any entrepreneur, your ability to take the risk, and risk in multiple dimensions. One, in terms of finances, because any business you talk about, there will be some degree of investment. Whether it's a low investment business or a high investment, that's a second point. That is up to your appetite of financial risk you can take. But having said that, there will be a financial risk that one has to be prepared for, and the type of business. Depending on the type of business, for example, co-working space has been a big booming business till pre-corona time in most cities. Now with corona situation and with working from home has been picking up, now that is going on a downward trend. Now that's a type of business. So you need to be wary of some types of businesses that will face rough weather due to situations, and the situations can be in your control or out of control. But that's a risk you take. And people to be hired or you partner with in terms of the different skills and capabilities. Then self-driven, as I said, that's linked to the second point on self-confidence as well. So you are your own boss. Most people who start their own business, they say, I want to be on my own. I don't have any boss to work with. So it comes with a pinch of salt, right? It is not so easy because you have to make your own plans. You have to, close all your actions. Yes, you will have a team to support, but you have to plan out and drive those actions, get the work done, and you have to motivate yourself when you're low, because every one of us human beings, we will have our ups and downs. So how do you motivate yourself and be self-driven is a key factor. And lastly, adapt to changes. The example I gave of a co-working spaces due to corona situation, and there are many other businesses that are getting disrupted in these current times. So you have to adapt to those changes, and that's very, very important to stay relevant. So these are some of the key differentiators. I'm sure there could be some more, but in my view, these are some of the top 5 differentiators for any successful entrepreneur. Next, what is the difference between an employee versus an entrepreneur? As I said, there's a lot of hype around entrepreneurship. Everyone wants to get into a startup. That's absolutely fine. But at the same time, the other side of the coin is, oh, I'll work in a company. At the end of the month, I'll get my salary credited to account. That's also easy life. So what's the difference? You need to understand the pros and cons. As an employee, you get your salary that is fixed, irrespective of the workload, whether some days in a month or in a year, you may not have so much of workload. Sometimes you will be working 16, 18 hours as well, but you still get your salary fixed, flat, fixed amount, right? Whereas for an entrepreneur, it is proportionate to the effort and the business results. So it is not fixed. Sometimes you'll put more efforts and you may get less income and vice versa. So that is the irony for an entrepreneur. Then as an employee, you are largely implementing actions which are decided by the management. Yes, if you are a part of a senior management role as an employee, then that's a different ball game. But most people in an organization, you are mostly doing the implementation role, largely, right? But whereas as an entrepreneur, right from the day one, irrespective of the age, irrespective of what you're doing, you have to plan everything yourself, decide and implement, right? The end to end. Now, as an employee, you cannot choose who your managers are. And the survey says people join companies and leave managers, right? The trend of exit interview very clearly shows a bad manager has been the top reason for people to leave jobs. And hence you cannot choose your manager. Whoever it is, you have to adjust to that. And you cannot choose your colleagues as well. You get into a team, whoever are there, you get along with them. Whereas an entrepreneur, you can form your own team. So you have the flexibility to hire based on the wavelength matches with them and the type of work culture and so on. Again, as an employee, how to do the work is mostly decided. Again, as I said, this could vary depending on the hierarchy of your position, but largely it is decided. But whereas as an entrepreneur, you decide how to do right from first step. The risk of a business loss is not so much on an employee, mostly, right? When you're in a senior role, yes, it would be, but mostly the risk of a business loss is not on the employee. Whereas for an entrepreneur, entire risk of the business loss rests with them. So the entrepreneur has to take the responsibility and accountability for the business loss. You cannot run away. You cannot blame anybody else. As an employee, you will be pushed. I mean, I'm using that phrase intentionally, though it may not sound very positive, but you will have constant follow-up from your manager to complete the work. Whereas as an entrepreneur, you've got to be self-driven, as we saw earlier. And if you experience problems and challenges, you can approach to a manager or a few other colleagues, and they can solve in some cases. As an entrepreneur, yes, that's where a mentor comes into a picture. You may not have a manager as such or a boss to go to, but you will have your other colleagues. You can talk to other fellow colleagues who are similarly into entrepreneurship, and hence the need of a mentor comes into picture. Every entrepreneur at whatever stage of their entrepreneurship journey you are in, you need to have a mentor, and that's very, very important. So given all these points, What do you think now? You want to be an employee as a safe bet, or you are ready to take up the entrepreneur journey? So that is what you need to decide. Everything in this world will have pros and cons. Nothing is perfect. You got to weigh in the pros versus the cons and then take your decision. What are some of the key guiding principles for an entrepreneur before you start? Right? There are some key points that you need to consider before you step into this journey. First, the time. How much time can I dedicate on a daily, weekly basis? Because I hear quite a few people say, just in a conservative basis, I'm already working in a company. I don't want to take the risk. I'll parallelly start, my entrepreneurship journey. Let's see how it goes, and then I leave the job. Trust me, that will not work. There are enough and more instances, and I myself am a living example, which I tried, that just doesn't work. So it all boils down to how much time can I dedicate. Even if I'm on a full-time basis, you got to be clear. Initial days are going to be very rough. So how much time I can dedicate, you got to be very clear about it. Then how much time will I give myself to decide if the business is a success or not? Now, let's face this. Every business will not be successful or may not be successful. As they say, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. So you have to be clear based on the risks that I highlighted earlier. Up to what point of time would you give yourself before you say, yes, I can see my business is running well, I'll continue this further. Or this business is not doing well, either I make some changes or I close this and start something else, or I go back to my employment. It can be anything, but you have to be very clear about it. This is not about to say you're being negative, but you got to be realistic. How much time will I give myself before I say, yes, my business is doing well? And it will differ from business to business, and it will differ from person to person. Whether it is 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, it depends. Next is money, the financial commitment that I can make. You have to be very clear. Depending on the type of business, the investments in some businesses are very low, in some very capital intense. So you have to be clear what type of business you're getting into. You do your business planning, you will get to know the financial commitment. And the effort. How far can I travel? So why I'm using this word specifically travel? Yes, in some businesses which are more tech based, and in the current situation, the travel may not be such a big factor. But in general, in the initial days, you will have to meet a lot of people, potential clients, potential investors or supporters, peers, you name it. So there will be extensive amount of travel. There is a limitation in terms of what you can do on phone, etc. But I think, yes, now with the current times, we have learned to adapt to that. So this part may not be so relevant in the current times, but it's still very important. You have to be ready and prepared to travel anywhere and everywhere. And lastly, the knowledge and the skill. Will I focus on a business where my existing skills will be used, or am I ready to learn something new? If I get a business idea, 8 out of 10 people that I talk to, what type of business you want to start? They say, I want to start a restaurant. I don't know what's the fascination for a restaurant, which is good. A food business is well good. As long as human beings are there, everyone needs to eat, no doubt about it. Now, if I think about myself, do I have the enough knowledge on the food and the cooking aspect? Surely no, I'm zero at it. Now, if I decide to get into a cooking business, am I just putting money and some efforts, or do I also need to know how the food industry works? I'm sure you need to know, right? So then that is a new area for me. I need to be open to learn that. I cannot just say that I'll employ a few chefs and I'll pump in money and it'll work. No, it'll not work. I may not be able to learn how to cook everything, but there is up to certain extent one has to be aware of that specific domain, right? So these are some of the guiding principles in terms of time, money, effort, knowledge, and skill that you need to decide before you venture out on the entrepreneurship journey. What are some of the entrepreneurs' groundwork? So this is a classic, approach: what, why, when, who, where, and how. This concept applies in many aspects in management, and I'm adapting, and I strongly recommend the same even for an entrepreneur. What is your business? Why are you doing this? When will you start? Can I start right away, or do I need to do some groundwork and it takes another 6 months, 1 year? And who are my customers? Who are my partners? who are my potential employees. So you got to be clear about it. And where would you do? Will I do in my own city to start with, and within your city only one region, or my entire state or country, or global? So depending on the type of business, you have to be clear. You may pilot it in one city or in one region, and as you see the success in few months and a year, you may expand it. That's fine. So that's part of your plan, right? But you got to be clear where you are going to start and where you will expand in future, and how you will go about doing this. The how part is more detailed, which we'll not talk here anyway, but that is the detailing part of actual implementation of your actions. And all of this encompasses with risks and challenges and the support system you need. Support system in terms of, as I said, it could be mentoring and guidance, people, technology support, vendor support, of course, clients you have, and you need some other people who can connect you to clients. So you need to engage and involve those people as well. Essentially, every entrepreneur need to answer each of these points in a great detail, and the level of detail you answer, that will give you the clarity of thought. And answers to one question may address to some of the others. So there are some interlinkages that you will find as you answer each one of these boxes in detail. And this will ensure that the business outcome is by design. They say, right, is it by design or is it by chance? So don't leave it by chance. Then you have to pray to God every day, right? Let it be by design. So you are in control of what you're doing. So some of the key factors that you need to consider when you're putting down a business plan, and these are exhaustive list. Not all these points may be relevant to all businesses. Depending on the type of business, it could vary, but this is a guide, general guide in a generic way. So from a production resource, when I use the word production, it need not be a manufacturing company. It can be a service as well. In terms of people, the number of people you need, the type of people in terms of their skills and capabilities. So one is that you need to define that. What are the materials you need? When you say material, if it is more service based, it could be your technology infrastructure. That itself is a material, right? And the space. So if you are having a team to work, how much of space you need? Or would it be everything remote working with work from home, with the way it's happening now? So you got to estimate all of that, because based on that, your investment budget or investment estimate will come into picture. Then funding requirement. So funding, broadly, you can split into two sections. One is a fixed investment or capital investment, as you would call, which is generally a one-time investment at the beginning. I need a premises, I need so many computers, I need, let's say if I take the same restaurant example, I need some cooking equipment, vessels, all those machinery that you need. So those are all your capital investment, which is largely one time. And then comes a recurring investment. So then you need to know what is the expense that you will incur on a day-to-day basis. You sum it up to a month. A monthly is a general norm. How much investment you need or expense you will incur on a monthly basis right from the first month. So initially it could be low and it can increase. It will include the salaries of people, rental, electricity, internet connection, and it goes on, right? Depending on the type of business. So you need to have a very good and a detailed estimate of these two, because if you are looking for funding, they will look for how detailed you've got into in terms of estimating these two sections. And lastly, the income and revenue estimate, very important, because everyone will look for, okay, for the next 1 year, what is your estimate of your income? How much revenue you think you will earn? And on what assumptions? See, nobody has seen the future. Nobody's an astrologer here, but you need to state your assumptions and say that, okay, assuming this is a kind of number of clients I will get, this is a number of units I will sell, etc. Depending on my pricing, this is the kind of revenue I will get. So you need to estimate on a month-on-month basis. So the general recommendation is at least for 12 months, you need to have in place. In some cases, they look for a 2-year or 3-year projection as well, right? So these are the key factors you need to consider. All of this collectively would constitute your business plan. Then comes business risks. As I said earlier, risk is a very key factor one has to consider. First of all, risk exists in every walk of life, no doubt. The current times is a classic example. The fact that you're stepping out of a house itself is becoming a risk, right? So there is risk in every walk of life. Likewise, there is a risk in the business as well. So what is a risk? How do you define risk in a generic way? It's an uncertain event that impacts the outcome of the business, of course, in a negative manner. Naturally, there are so many other events that can impact in a positive manner. We welcome that. So you won't call that as a risk. The key point here is it's impacting in a negative manner. So that is a business risk. Now, as an entrepreneur, you need to identify all potential. And I have highlighted those two words in bold, all and potential risks that can impact the business. So what do you mean by potential? Actually, there is a very detailed method of risk identification process. There's a tool and concept there, which I'm not getting in today. The way you do that is you have to identify all potential risks in your business. When I say potential, it may not have ever occurred in the past. Sometimes the reaction is, oh, this risk has never even occurred, so why are we even discussing about it? So no problem. If it has never occurred, there's a first time for everything, right? So I'll give one classic example. Let's say you are doing a risk assessment with an airline industry. And if you were doing this, say, about 10 years back, and if one of the risks was entire aircraft would disappear, and people would have laughed about it, right? How can an aircraft disappear? How can that be a risk? It sounds very silly. But it did happen a few years back with Malaysian Airlines. The entire aircraft disappeared. Even today, it is not solved completely, right? And that is so intriguing, and it is amazing on one front and shocking on the other front, that how can such a big object just disappear into thin air? Whether it crashed into sea, there are so many theories. But the point is, you have to be as wild as that. Right? You need to have a bit of pessimistic thinking here to identify all potential risks. The idea of doing this is this will make you well prepared, right? So that anything, eventuality that comes, you're prepared to face that. This does not mean that there will not be any risk that you will be confronting with. For example, nobody would have estimated the kind of risk and impact that the corona situation is got us into. Nobody on this planet would have made that kind of risk assessment, right? We are all now adopting to that and learning. Those are all extreme examples, but otherwise, in a normal scenario, you have to be very thorough in all the potential risks from your business standpoint. Now, moving on, what are the key actions? First, decide on the type of business to start. Define the details about the business, which I shared, the business plan, key factors, the what, why, where, and how, the funding requirement, income and expense projection, at least for 12 months. As I said, at least for 12 months. If you're able to do for 24 months, 36 months, excellent. But 12 months, one has to be prepared for. And discuss these business details with your mentor. It can be anyone, right? Anyone whom you have confidence in or whom you have trust in. Share those details and discuss with them. The reason is a fresh perspective always makes it approaching a bank for a loan. Before you do that, have someone with whom you can bounce off your ideas and all these details so that they give you a fresh perspective, and that will help you to improve. And lastly, time to act. See, there is a point up to which you need to plan, but very soon you have to get into action mode. Sometimes we drag this planning phase a bit too much. No doubt planning is important. I personally insist on that. I'm a big believer of a very good and thorough plan, but how thorough, right? So you cannot keep dragging on and on and on. So somewhere you got to draw a line, and there is no formula. What's the timeline works for me, for my business could be different to you and somebody else. That is fine. But you got to take the judgment and identify when you can start to act in a realistic sense, right? So lastly, few thoughts that I want to end with. Walt Disney has said, the way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. That's what I was just mentioning a little while ago. So we can discuss and discuss and discuss, but somewhere you got to draw a line and put that into action, right? Otherwise, it becomes very theoretical and very academic. We are not, academics is another part. We are not discouraging that. That's a totally different stream. But as an entrepreneur, it's all about action. And Thomas Edison very rightly said, I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that won't work. right? So as they said, there are many other quotes on similar lines. Every failure is a stepping stone to success, and so on. So yes, once you fail, you will be disappointed, you will feel sad, you will feel bad, no doubt about it. All of us will go through those emotions. But very soon you should come out of that and take the learning from it and then move on. So that is critical part. We are not saying you be like a stone faced and you should not get disturbed or anything. Absolutely not. All of us will get disturbed. We will not like it, any amount of failure, no doubt about it. But what you make out of it after that is very important. So that is what matters, right? So with that, thank you very much for patiently listening to me, and I wish all of you all the best. Whatever you are doing, either as an employee or as an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter. Even as an employee nowadays, we're talking about entrepreneur's mindset, right? We cannot have everybody on this planet becoming an entrepreneur, right? Let's be practical. But even as an employee, we talk about having an entrepreneur's mindset, and some of the big corporates are investing heavily in training their employees in this dimension as well. Because if you have that entrepreneur's mindset, that will benefit the corporates again. So it is not about only if I want to start a business, I need to know these things or adopt some of these concepts. No, even as an employee, you very well can and should adopt this entrepreneurial mindset and enjoy the journey. That's all I would say. Whatever you do, just enjoy the journey, nothing more than. Thank you very much.